Listen, there's a specific feeling you've probably had in the last few years that you can't quite name. It sits in your chest when you're scrolling through news you don't fully trust, or when you're at a dinner table and someone mentions politics and the whole room tenses like a drawn bow. It's the sensation that something fundamental has shifted, that the ground beneath everyday life has gone soft, but everyone's still walking around pretending the floor is solid. That feeling has a name. It's not anxiety. It's not depression. It's stage recognition. Your nervous system has identified a pattern that your conscious mind hasn't fully accepted yet. You're watching a society move through psychological stages that appear with eerie consistency in collapsing civilizations. And here's the disturbing part. These stages are as predictable as the stages of grief. And just like grief, you don't get to skip them. Now, I'm not claiming this is ironclad scientific law etched in stone. This isn't a peer-reviewed formula you can graph with precision. But the pattern shows up so consistently from Rome to the Soviet Union to Weimar Germany that ignoring it would be stupid. Social psychologists and historians studying systemic failure keep documenting the same psychological cascade. Whether you want to call it stages or phases or just a useful lens doesn't matter. What matters is that it's a map. And right now, you need a map more than you need certainty. The first stage is normalization, and it's lethal because it feels like sanity. You're in this stage if you find yourself saying things like, "It's always been crazy," or "Every generation thinks they're living through the end times," or "Things will calm down after the next election." The signature here isn't that people don't see problems. Everyone sees problems. The signature is the elaborate architecture your mind builds to explain why those problems are temporary, cyclical, or unrelated to anything systemic. Researchers call this crisis habituation. Your frame of reference collapses inward. You stop measuring your society against what it should be and start measuring it against what it was last month. When grocery prices spike, you think inflation is bad right now. Not the currency is losing coherence. When institutions behave erratically, you think politics is messy, not legitimacy is evaporating. The language itself is a coping mechanism. And here's the part nobody tells you. This is adaptive. Your brain is protecting you. If you consciously process the full weight of systemic decline every morning, you wouldn't function. You wouldn't go to work, you wouldn't pay your mortgage or plan for next year. The bottom would fall out of your motivational structure. So your mind builds compartments. You can know that ocean ecosystems are collapsing and still plan a beach vacation. You can know that political polarization is at historic highs and still believe the next election fixes things. This compartmentalization isn't stupidity. It's a feature of human cognition under existential ambiguity. But it has a shelf life. It works until the gap between the story you're telling yourself and the reality you're experiencing becomes too wide to ignore. When that gap breaks open, you don't gradually transition, you fall. Stage 2 is anxiety awareness, and it hits like a threshold crossing. You're in this stage if your sleep has gotten worse for reasons you can't pin down, if your ability to concentrate has fractured, if you have a low-grade dread that doesn't attach to anything specific, or attaches to everything at once. Psychologists studying pre-collapse populations use a term that should unsettle you: pre-traumatic stress. Not stress about what happened, stress about what you can feel coming but can't yet name or avoid. Your body knows before your thoughts catch up. You start checking news more often but trusting it less. Conversations with friends feel slightly performative, like everyone's pretending things are normal because naming the abnormality out loud would make it too real. You're not crazy. Your threat detection system is working exactly as designed. The problem is you're in a situation it wasn't designed for, a slow-motion systemic unraveling that doesn't give you a clear enemy or a clear escape route. Surveys from Argentina's 2001 economic crisis show the same markers: hypervigilance, irritability, difficulty planning beyond next month, and a growing certainty that the people in charge either don't understand what's happening or are lying about it. Both are usually true. Here's why this stage is dangerous. You have the most agency and the least clarity. You know something is wrong, you don't know what to do about it. And because humans are social animals who look to the group for threat confirmation, you become extremely susceptible to two competing forces. One is dismissive reassurance from authorities still in stage 1 telling you to calm down, that you're overreacting, that the adults are in the room. The other is catastrophic narratives from people already in stage 4 telling you it's over, the collapse is imminent, prepare for war. Both feel compelling. One tells you to go back to sleep, the other tells you to burn it down. Neither gives you a functional map. The way through is to move from ambient anxiety to specific preparation. That transition is the border into stage 3, bargaining preparation. You're here if you started learning skills you never thought you'd need: gardening, canning, first aid. If you've bought emergency supplies not because of a rational threat assessment, but because purchasing decisions feel like progress. If you've looked at land in rural areas or thought seriously about what you'd do if the grid went down. The core belief in this stage is simple. If you do the right things, make the right choices, learn the right skills, you can insulate yourself and the people you love from the worst outcomes. And here's the complicated part. You're not entirely wrong. Preparation matters, skills matter, community matters. But bargaining isn't really about those things. It's about control. It's your psyche's desperate attempt to restore agency in a situation that's largely systemic and beyond individual influence. This was everywhere in Greece during the economic collapse of 2010 to 2015. Middle-class families who'd never questioned the system suddenly started keeping chickens and joining barter networks. Psychologists called it micro-survivalism. The behavior wasn't irrational, it was psychologically adaptive. It gave people something to do with the fear. But here's the trap. If you prepare while still believing the old system will restore itself, you optimize for the wrong things. You wait for signals of recovery instead of signals of acceleration. You build a plan that assumes the grid comes back, the currency stabilizes, the institutions regain coherence. And when those things don't happen, when the next threshold breaks, you're psychologically unprepared even if your pantry is full. You want to know when that threshold breaks? Let me tell you what it looks like. It's not gradual. It's the day you realize your preparation isn't big enough for the problem you're facing. Maybe it's a currency event that doesn't resolve in a week. Maybe it's a supply chain failure where the grocery store stays half empty for months. Maybe it's an election where both sides claim victory and the institutional answer is chaos instead of clarity. Whatever the trigger, the psychological experience is the same. The feeling that everything you've done to prepare is a child's fort built against a hurricane, that all your careful plans were based on assumptions that no longer hold. And when that realization hits, really hits, most people don't get more prepared. They get angry. Stage 4 is anger and tribalism, and this is where societies fracture in ways that don't heal. You're here if you've stopped arguing with the other side and started preparing for them, if you've begun to self-sort your relationships, pulling closer to people who see the world like you do and cutting off people who don't. Maybe you even feel a small secret satisfaction when bad things happen to people in the outgroup. Maybe you even feel a small secret satisfaction when they suffer, when their policies backfire, when their leaders fail, when they experience the consequences you predicted. And here's what you need to hear, even though it's uncomfortable. That satisfaction feels good. It feels like clarity, like righteous vindication, like you're finally seeing reality clearly while they're delusional. This is the most seductive part of stage 4. The tribalization doesn't feel like you're losing your mind. It feels like you're finally thinking clearly. The other side isn't just wrong anymore. They're dangerous. They're existential. And if you have to choose between principles and survival, between fairness and protecting your people, you're starting to know which one you'd pick. You're not a bad person for feeling this, but you need to understand what's happening in your brain. When people lose faith in the system's ability to protect them and adjudicate conflict fairly, they don't become individualists. They become hyper-tribal. They find smaller circles of trust, usually defined by ideology, geography, or religion, and they redirect their fear outward as aggression toward the perceived enemy. This circuitry is ancient.
For most of human history, when large-scale social orders collapsed, your survival depended on identifying your group and defending it against other groups. That wiring doesn't disappear because we built nation-states. It goes dormant, and when the nation-state begins to fail, it reactivates with a speed that shocks people. Societies don't go from pluralistic to genocidal overnight. They move through a documented pattern. First, institutional trust collapses. Then people re-identify along older, deeper lines. The signs are measurable. Increased in-group preference, decreased empathy for out-group suffering, rising acceptance of political violence, not as breakdown, but as legitimate defense. You start seeing dehumanizing rhetoric, not from fringe voices, but from mainstream ones, teachers, journalists, people you thought were reasonable. And here's the thing that should genuinely scare you. This stage is self-reinforcing. The more one group tribalizes, the more the other group feels existentially threatened and tribalizes in response. It's a feedback loop. It doesn't require conspiracy or evil. It just requires enough fear and enough institutional failure that people stop trusting the system to resolve conflict peacefully. When that breaks, they prepare to resolve it themselves. Historians call this pre-Civil War psychology. It's been documented in 1850s America, 1930s Spain, 1990s Yugoslavia. The temperature rises slowly, then all at once, and the single factor that determines whether a society in stage 4 collapses into open violence or manages to stabilize isn't leadership or policy. It's whether enough people move into stage 5 before the tribalization becomes irreversible. Stage 5 is mourning and reorientation, and it requires something from you that's harder than any preparation, any skill, any amount of stored food. It requires you to let something die. Not just the old system, not just your expectations, something in you. The belief that the future would look like the past, only better. The assumption that your children would have more opportunities than you did. The conviction that the institutions were basically sound, even if flawed. The idea that progress was a law of nature instead of a temporary condition. When those beliefs die, and they will if you're paying attention, you have to mourn them the way you'd mourn a person. Fully, with grief that sits in your chest and makes everything taste like ash for a while. Most people never do this. They skip the mourning and jump to rage or nihilism or retreat into fantasy. But if you can actually sit with the grief, if you can let yourself feel the full weight of what's being lost without turning it into blame or escape, something clarifies on the other side. You stop asking whether collapse is happening. You stop arguing about timelines. You stop waiting for someone to fix it. Instead, you start asking a different kind of question. What do I do today, in the world as it actually is, to build something worth defending? Not worth saving, defending, because saving implies you can restore what was. Defending means you're protecting what can still be, even if it looks nothing like you expected. This isn't acceptance as resignation. It's acceptance as functional realism. Let me give you a concrete example of what this looks like. In the Russian countryside during the 1990s collapse, there was a woman, a former school teacher, who started a seed library. Not because she thought she could save the economy, not because she was preparing for some apocalyptic bunker scenario. She did it because she realized that when systems fail, the people who survive are the ones who can grow food, and the people who can grow food are the ones who have seeds that work in their climate. So every week, she'd meet with neighbors. They'd share seeds, share knowledge about what grew well, what failed, how to save seeds for next year. It wasn't heroic, it wasn't even particularly organized, but it was real. It was horizontal action at a scale she could actually affect. That's what stage 5 looks like. You stop looking up for solutions and start looking around. You stop trying to fix the system or prepare to survive its collapse. You start building different systems, smaller and more resilient, in the wreckage of the old one. But here's what you actually came here to find out. Which stage are we in? The answer is, we're not in one. Societies don't move through these stages uniformly. Different populations, different communities, even different people in your own life are in completely different stages right now. And that's part of what makes this moment so volatile and disorienting. You have tens of millions still in stage 1. Fully normalized, convinced everything is basically fine. You have tens of millions in stage 2. doom scrolling at 2 in the morning, feeling insane because their daily life looks normal, but nothing feels normal. You have millions in stage 3, learning to garden and buying gold, trying to prepare their way out of a systemic problem. And you have millions in stage 4, fully tribalized, convinced the other side is an existential threat and conflict is inevitable. But if you look at the systems level, at institutional trust metrics, political polarization data, economic instability indicators, the pattern is clear. We're somewhere between stage 2 and stage 4. And we're moving faster than most people realize. The ambient anxiety is now measurable in mental health statistics and substance abuse rates. The tribalization is visible enough that political scientists use phrases like cold civil war in peer-reviewed work. The bargaining is everywhere in the explosion of prepper content and mutual aid organizing. And the normalization is still strong enough that most people go to work, pay bills, plan vacations, holding all of this in the back of their minds like background radiation. So here's what you do with this. First, identify which stage you're in personally, because the stage determines what you can see and what you're blind to. If you're still normalizing, your work is waking up without breaking. If you're in anxiety, your work is moving toward preparation without paralysis. If you're in bargaining, your work is being honest about what you're actually preparing for and whether your plan matches the scale of the problem. If you're in anger, your work is finding belonging without the humanization, which might be the hardest thing on this list. And if you're in mourning, your work is building systems that might survive what's coming, while knowing you can't control whether they do. Second, understand that you can't pull someone from stage 1 to stage 5 in a single conversation. You'll just sound unhinged. But you can meet people one stage ahead of where they are and help them across that threshold. That's how populations move through this. Not all at once, but in waves, in conversations, in moments of recognition where someone finally names the thing they've been feeling. Third, accept that you don't control the timeline. You don't control whether this accelerates or stabilizes. What you can control is how you move through it, whether you move with awareness or denial, whether you build capacity or consume distraction, whether you find community or embrace isolation. Those choices compound, and in a collapse scenario, they're the difference between people who adapt and people who shatter. The stages aren't prophecy, they're pattern recognition, and once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. That nameless feeling you had at the start, now you have a framework for it. The question is what you do next. The stage we're in isn't final, the trajectory isn't locked, but it's real, and it's moving. So look around. Ask yourself honestly, which stage am I in? And then ask the harder question, what does the next stage require me to let die so I can move through it intact? Because ready or not, we're all in motion. The only choice is whether you move through this awake.